Good afternoon, and welcome to today's Adweek webinar, where we'll be looking at how brand messaging is still critical in a demand gen world, and what it really takes for you to really, build your pipeline in this day and age of performance marketing. And today's webinar is being sponsored by The Marketing Practice. I'm Stuart File, Vice President of Branded Content at Adweek, and I am going to be your host for today's webinar. Before we begin, I'm just going to take a few minutes here and make sure that you know what to expect from our presentation, and also that you are familiar with the various features of our webinar platform. Our actual presentation today should go somewhere in the 30-minute range. Afterwards, we're going to have plenty of time for audience Q&A. So if at any point during our webinar today, if you have a question for our speakers, just simply use the question tool that you see there on the left side of your screen, and we're going to get to as many audience questions as we can following the presentation and the slide portion of our presentation. And again, I always urge you, ask your questions when you have them. Just get them submitted and into the queue. That way we've got everything sort of set up when we get to the Q&A portion at the end. It's not too late to invite your colleagues to join us today, and we'd really love it if they would. So if you have colleagues who you think want to learn more about this topic, and gee, who doesn't want to learn more about building your pipeline? About 15 minutes ago, we sent you a final reminder email for our webinar today. In there, you will find a link to the registration page. So grab that link, send it to your colleagues. There's still plenty of time. They can register, come on in, and join us live. But if they can't make it live, or if you have to leave early or something like that, today's webinar is being recorded and will be available on demand, and we're going to send you a link to that on-demand recording later today. So check your email about 3:30 Eastern Time today. You'll get a link to the on-demand version. Often we get a lot of requests for the slide deck, and we always want to make a PDF of the slides available, and again, we've done that today. So if you are interested in getting a PDF of the slides, you can find them right now in the Event Resources tab. That tab should be at the top of your screen. So head on in there, you can grab a PDF of today's presentation, always good for referring back to after the webinar. Lastly, I just want to remind everyone to please check out the Adweek webinar calendar, www.adweek.com/webinars with an S. We've got a whole bunch of webinars coming up, doing 3-4 of them a week. So see what we've got coming up, see what interests you. We're sure you'll get some value out of it. Sign up for an upcoming webinar. You'll also get full access to our archive of on-demand webinars there. That's every webinar we've done over the past 12 months. So you have a little bit of time, you want to catch up on things, go on in and check out that archive. Lots of great topics, lots of knowledge that we've been sharing over this time. But let's not take away from today's webinar, and let me just take a minute here and quickly introduce our speakers to you. First off, we're very, very happy to have as our guest speaker today, Annie Headley. Annie is VP of Corporate Marketing over at Nutanix, where she leads the brand and digital teams over there. If you don't know Nutanix, it's a cloud software company. And of course, as you can tell by her title, she's responsible for developing and executing integrated and scalable marketing programs. So she's going to be able to share some of the firsthand knowledge that she has in demand gen and building that pipeline, not just of what she's done at Nutanix, but she was also at companies like Hewlett-Packard Enterprise and Aruba Networks and Cisco and F5, as she's been doing and experienced in a lot of these tech brands. And from our sponsor today, we are also very happy to be joined by David Hayes. David's the VP of Client Growth over at the Marketing Practice. And as you can tell again, nice to have descriptive titles, isn't it? He's responsible for ensuring client success by delivering global integrated business-to-business marketing programs for U.S. clients of the Marketing Practice. So David and Annie, I want to welcome you both. And David, over to you to start our webinar today.
Thank you, Stuart. I appreciate you having us today and Adweek sponsoring this. and welcome everybody who's joining us from around the country and the world. So yeah, me and Annie are excited to talk to you today. There's three key outtakes that we're looking to talk through over the course of our presentation today, and ultimately hoping for you to garner some insights that you can take back to your own organizations. The first one is around how to connect brand and demand activities and ultimately why it matters. The second one is around what's involved in creating full funnel customer journeys and the impact that can have. And finally, strategies to align budgets, media plans, and stakeholders. So as we get into this, I think the stat to kind of kick this off from the end of 2020 is the reality that only 22% of B2B companies have fully integrated their brand and demand marketing, according to Forrester. And that ultimately is something which, for me and Annie, who obviously have had the privilege of partnering together for a number of years now, I've really talked about this topic of the importance of connecting your brand and demand marketing programs with this kind of idea of this notion called brand gen. It's a topic that we talk a lot about. I'm very excited and to share some of our perspective with you all today on. So I'm the proud father of 6-year-old twins. This is Rupert and Olivia. They've kind of become a stable feature of my personal life, but ultimately, since we're all working remotely, they've definitely found their way into my professional narrative, as it would seem. I love these guys. They're part of our team. They definitely share our family values. But for any of you on the call with kids, they ultimately, as individuals, often find themselves competing, for our attention in pursuit of their perceived goals that make them feel happy and fulfilled. Oftentimes, really, in reality, they're often trying to get to the same result, but simply through different priorities and approaches, ultimately in the pursuit of them feeling fulfilled and content. So the question really that is, so what have my twins got to do with this notion of brand and demand? And for us, it's really that notion that how do we think about brand and demand teams within corporate marketing organizations and some of the challenges that we see across the board that can impact the ability for organizations to be effectively bringing these two worlds together. Ultimately, we're all competing for the attention of the same parent, aren't we? In the marketing world, it's the customer, which if we're not careful and we don't orchestrate how we organize our campaigns across, top of funnel brand building to bottom of funnel demand, if we're not careful, we can create noise for our customers, create confusion, which is ultimately going to have an impact on our ability to nurture them through the sales pipeline to convert them into deals and opportunities. Received wisdom in the B2B marketing industry, popularized by consultants, is generally that marketing functions should be structured by discipline. So we see that a lot of organizations will have a content team, a digital team, a campaigns team, and so on. But the idea is, if you bolt these specialist skills together and create an efficient, scalable factory churning out steady streams of marketing qualified leads, so the sales team to gobble up, you're gonna get there. I think the result and the problem that we often see though is that each of these teams ends up getting pretty focused on their own channels and optimizing for their own performance measures. Content for consumption, you might see digital for conversation and campaigns, ultimately trying to focus on leads. Marketing departments also across the board tend to be organized by funnel-based structures. So they have a brand team that's very focused on top of funnel, and their demand teams are then focusing on the lead generation at the bottom of the funnel. And unfortunately, there can sometimes be a disconnect between the two priorities those groups within marketing focusing on. So with that disconnect, continuing to occur between those two organizations, Annie, I'd love to get your thoughts on what first got you thinking about this disconnect between brand and demand teams.
Thanks, David. First, I have to tell you, such cute kids. I've seen them on Zoom. They are adorable. And that sibling rivalry is very, very cute. So in thinking about brand and demand, I again, think about it the same way. They're two sides of the same coin. So I was leading the corporate marketing function. This was a few years ago. And my remit was to focus on brand development, brand awareness, and I had responsibility for our brand campaign. But meanwhile, I had a colleague who managed our demand gen strategy, and she had her own, team. She had her own media strategy and her own media campaigns team. And I realized we were two completely separate departments brand and demand. And we were working on different KPIs, but really, ultimately, we were both trying to increase revenue for the company. And so I was thinking we were, essentially competing for the same audience. And I thought, why aren't we working together to create brand gen campaigns, right? Which is campaigns that are meant to build on our brand awareness and ultimately help to drive demand and drive conversion. Because in reality, every demand gen touch is also an opportunity for a brand touch and vice versa. So I'm thinking together we could drive much more impactful results if we used our resources more efficiently and if we aligned our goals and if we aligned our media strategy. So brand teams are often, goaled to reach a broader audience of prospects and customers, while demand gen teams traditionally are focused on, particular prospects because they're interested in the active buyers. So while brand is viewed as a longer term play, organizations and companies focus on trying to hit those short-term targets through demand gen, right? So, but I don't think this is the most efficient, solution if we're going for long-term growth, because I believe demand gen campaigns will convert at a higher rate if the time and the investment is really been put in place to help nurture the target audience through brand influence.
So Annie, so building on your point about brand marketing generally kind of sitting in that kind of long-term play, one of the challenges that I think we see a lot of B2B brands having across the board in the kind of the enterprise technology space is that these organizations are in incredible pressure to focus on short-term goals. And we saw that in our own research, a study that we conducted where we surveyed over 2,000 technology marketing professionals on trends that were impacting their overall effectiveness. What we saw, was a decline in budget being devoted to that long-term growth and that brand building. And I think possibly that's been accelerated by this current situation from this past year of COVID. But I think ultimately we've seen that number further decline since last year from our 2019 study, from over 60% of their budget to going towards long-term goals has been reduced down to a pretty considerable drop to 21%. All the way down to 9%. And related to that, the number of technology brands devoting, almost half of their resources towards this brand building is decreased, more than half, to almost a third in this past year. Annie, what are your thoughts? Do you think the pressure to deliver against these short-term timescales has caused a bigger disconnect between brand and demand teams, particularly with pressure for those quarterly goals that we're all marching towards?
Yeah, I absolutely do. And I think it comes down to a misunderstanding about, ROI. There's this idea that brand marketing is, it's a nice to have because it's so hard to justify the ROI for brand campaigns versus the very, very tangible, marketing qualified leads for demand gen campaigns. So a few years ago, at the same company, our demand gen campaigns were struggling and conversions were low. And I started, as I said, I was thinking about, well, why are we working separately for the same ultimate goal, right? And this made me think, do our prospects even know who we are? Why would someone purchase our product or download an asset or come to one of our webinars if they don't even know who we're about, and what we can offer to them?
And I think that's one of the challenges, isn't it, when you've got that disconnect between brand and demand. Ultimately, we're not going to see the performance of those demand gen programs, which again, from a KPIs perspective, they have some pretty robust metrics and goals set against them. But if people don't know who we are, we know we're not going to get people interacting and engaging with those programs. So we have to look at how we can maintain visibility, reminding prospects of your existence and ensuring that when that pain point reaches a threshold in their customer journey, we're very much as a brand, being top of mind, and they're going to look to move forward with conversations with us versus a competitor. I think it is that how do you plan to make sure that you do have that air coverage in place to support the messaging to build brand, build reputation in the market, which is then going to fuel your demand gen programs.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. We all know research indicates that people do show a preference for a thing, an idea, or a message if they are familiar with it. So repeating a message leads to familiarity, right, which then ultimately leads to preference or affinity. So sending a message more than once is an effective way to get someone to take action because they've now developed a preference for it. Then in looking at this chart, so, prospects want to get to know you as a company before they make a commitment, right? Once they understand, they have a baseline of what your organization and what potential business outcomes you can drive for them, that is when they're willing to engage or to consider the next step. So brand marketing brings your company solution to that prospect so that they can even consider you as they're looking to make a solution or to make a decision rather. So we'll refer to this as a top of funnel activity. So as that prospect is engaged and begins to learn more about your solutions next, you can then continue down the funnel as this chart shows and start to capture active buyers when they go through their purchasing decision, right? So this is where demand gen efforts come in. So creating a journey. So I often equate brand gen to dating or meeting a new friend. We don't expect a new friend to plan a trip to Europe with us when we first meet for coffee, and we don't talk about adopting a puppy together when we're on our first coffee date, right? So appropriate or not, if a prospect doesn't know who we are, what we are about, and what we can do for them, we can't really expect them to take a test drive or try our product, download our asset, or come to our webinar. So we actually need to create a hierarchy of call to actions and that leverages our brand positioning, value proposition, and messaging combined with offering them new campaign assets so that we can move this prospect through the buying journey. So brand gen campaigns should bring together multiple consistent and cohesive messaging and touch points that will ultimately help to convert at a higher rate. So again, studies have shown you have to get in front of someone 6 to 7 times before they even make a purchase. So I see this as 2 options. You can either use all of those touches to encourage a prospect to interact with the same asset, or you can spend a few of those touches on the front end and say, let me tell you who we are as a company. Let me tell you how we can help you. Let me show you, what value we can bring to you. And then when you're ready to connect the dots to the actual products and solutions that make sense based on your use cases, we're here. So giving them that opportunity to understand you better and your company better will drive more interest in the content that they're being served. So another important consideration here is the structure. So a lot of companies have either a global demand center or an integrated campaigns team focused entirely on demand gen. And these teams will engage with all of the same cross-functional teams in order to develop the campaign playbook, come up with a concept, come up with a media plan, define the programs, define the tactics, come up with KPIs, et cetera. So it's really critical to make sure that, while you're building out the demand gen campaign, you're really creating brand awareness and you're really baking that in as part of the buyer journey at the top and potentially the middle of the funnel when you plan these demand gen campaigns.
Yeah, and I think on that point, Annie, I also think it's really important that, ultimately, I think agencies have a responsibility here as well to be advocating for creating these creative platforms that can connect these dots, connect the funnel, and ultimately make sure that as we're thinking about the right set of creative messaging, we want to make sure that we're planning that in a way that can transcend the funnel so we don't end up with a demand generation program that feels extremely different and perhaps even disconnected from our top of funnel brand building efforts. So thank you, Annie, for those insights there. We're now going to kind of share with you, how we talk about the opportunities and lessons learned, particularly from Annie's wealth of experience in this domain, of ideas for how to look to align budgets, media plans, and stakeholders to help you in your pursuit of getting to a more connected experience. So if we're going to building off what Annie was just talking to us about, if we can agree that long-term brand building is a fundamental to sustain growth, this stat further hits home, I think, the problem that we're talking about here, which is to prove the value of long-term brand building. It's really difficult if we're not actually investing in our campaigns to remain in market long enough to the point where we can actually start to assess whether they've been successful or not. And right now, about 20% of B2B marketers report on campaigns impact beyond that 6 months. And as I think many of us know on this call, in the enterprise sales cycle, these can often extend way beyond that 6-point mark. So in that regard, I think marketers are shortchanging themselves, measuring campaigns impact long before that sales cycle is concluded, and we're really able to honestly and effectively evaluate whether something was impactful or not. And again, it's understandable when marketers are under pressure, from stakeholders and broader businesses to deliver results quickly, and particularly usually within a quarter. Evidence from our own campaigns, experience working with clients that we've ran programs with, we find campaigns lasting between 1 and 2 years generally perform consistently better than those when we're running campaigns for the 3 to 6 month mark. And ultimately, when we combine as part of the messaging, those frameworks that I was speaking to a minute ago, that combination of rational and emotional messaging, it gives us that ability to make sure that we're connecting brand and demand activities in a way that ultimately we've seen consistently drive better results. The flagship brand campaigns that you're putting out into market, if you can orchestrate those in a way that actually connect with your account-based marketing programs or account-based experiences, what's being commonly referred to these days, it's a real opportunity to actually start to look at targeting specific accounts or cluster of accounts, perhaps aligned by an industry, to generate awareness in the wider market, building that reputation and making it easier and possibly looking to accelerate sales in the near future. For the example here for a large telco that we've been working with over in the UK, the value of an ABM program there was to complement the brand marketing exercises and channels that we had in place. Because unlike broad strokes brand campaign marketing, where it's very much one to many, you were able to just kind of deliver a lot of that same messaging and sentiment that you're conveying through your brand marketing, but in a much more personalized and pointed message to your audiences, ultimately helping convey very specifically how you fit in, the value you can bring, and establish what every brand ultimately is looking to achieve, which is to start building that relationship with customers. So to Annie's point a couple of minutes ago, it makes it much easier to then create the foundation for then a conversation about how we can partner together. Makes sense that a reduction in the amount of time marketers are reporting on campaigns before declaring them successful or failures is having an impact on our ability to get buy-in from stakeholders and the rest of the business. I think we've all experienced those challenges where a campaign might be in market and you're not able to quite see whether it's conclusively performed well or not because it's simply just not been in market long enough, or the perceived value of a brand building campaign may not be felt for months down the road because of it needing to ultimately to what Annie was describing, really set up that kind of consideration for demand when the time is right. So Annie, how do you go about proving the value of this approach to your organization? Getting stakeholders and budget buy-in for a brand gen approach with these challenging circumstances and context of quarterly sales goals. Annie, you still with us?
Oh, I am so sorry. That age-old "you're on mute" just happened to me.
No problem.
So I was just going to say that, I can share some insights, but it's not one size fits all, right? We are all from different companies, different sizes, and we're working with different leadership teams and marketing teams. But one of the first things that I led the team through to think about is we have to rethink our KPIs and measurements. So beyond evaluating brand campaign performances, which are traditionally based on impressions and engagement, share of voice and measuring brand affinity, we should consider, actually we have to consider showing the impact that the brand campaign is having on the conversion of the demand activities. So it's not so you're measuring, did the brand campaign influence demand gen, right? So there's a benchmark, and then you're measuring, once we started doing brand gen, our demand campaigns have converted at a higher rate. So I actually reached out to the digital marketing strategist at my previous company, where I introduced brand gen in late 2018, and I have to say it took us almost a year, maybe actually a year, to get everything and everyone in sync. But that former colleague of mine replied back to me and said that, in the last year of deploying brand gen and continually optimizing, that's the other thing. You have to continually optimize. It isn't a set it and forget it. It isn't, all right, I'm running a brand campaign over the top of a demand gen campaign, so now we're done. You have to optimize. You have to optimize what people are seeing. You have to optimize where the impact is. You have to optimize for performance of content and assets. But she said that they've improved their conversion rate by 71% over the last year. And then the second point is it's important to have a clear plan in place. So to do that, you have to be, sort of talking about the same thing. You have to have a shared language, and you have to, have some shared values here. So to have this shared vocabulary, you need to have every member on the team to sort of understand, what we're all trying to get to. So in marketing, there's a lot of jargon and buzzwords, right? And so we use that as, to set strategies for both internal and external stakeholders. So if you have a strong sense of, shared language amongst the team members, because the goal is you want to have the same goals and the same objectives and the same expectations. So basically, you've got to all be in the same boat, rowing in the same direction, heading to the same destination, right? You've got to care, the brand team has to care about the demand gen team and what the demand gen team's trying to do, and vice versa. The demand gen team has to care and know that the brand team is after the same thing that they're after. And then this one is important, right? Ideally, you have, one media budget for both brand and demand gen campaigns, right? So for your holistic media strategy and budget, right, some of it should be carved out to build awareness at the top of the funnel. And then, and some, for, you want to be able to retarget those, prospects that you have. And then you also, have to spend that same budget to reach middle of funnel, where you might have more premium assets that are gated. So the idea is you have to think about it as one spectrum from top of funnel to bottom of funnel. And so you're not competing, but you're trying to get mind share. So at the top of the funnel, you're building brand. You're talking about your company and why and what your business outcome is. At the middle of funnel, you are talking about your solutions and you're offering some premium assets. And then at the bottom of the funnel, you're encouraging them to convert, come to an event, join a webinar, download an asset, right? So it's one stream as you're thinking about content and creative. So it should also be one stream as you're thinking about your media budget, because you ultimately, if you don't coordinate your efforts, you could be competing with your own company for the same eyeballs. So, taking a true brand gen approach, it isn't, again, just about coming up with a campaign and the assets. It's about really integrating the media plan so that you have this 360 view of the customer, and then strategically targeting how and when you speak to that prospect and customer.
I think related to that as well, Annie, I think this is another area where I think it's it's important that you also get your agencies working together as well. Obviously, I'm sure the majority of you have a variety of different agencies supporting across different types of services. And I think one thing we find is it's incredibly important that we collaborate with our media partners, with other agency teams that are involved in campaigns or programs across the board, so that we can also do our part in connecting those dots. So I think that's another piece of context there.
Yep, totally agree. Right. So to make it work end to end, you've got to change the way you look at quite a few things, right? Budget, structure, KPI, measurement. So it's a lot of moving parts, and it might be new muscle memory that you have to form within the company, right? So it's crucial that you communicate the plan, you socialize your strategy, and you share often, right? Like I go on roadshows all the time within the company, right? I'm talking to the campaign team, I'm talking to the theater leadership team, I'm talking to marketing leadership. I'm talking to my own team to make sure that we're all doing what we're doing in a coordinated, impactful way. So you've got to bring the colleagues and the leadership team along for the journey. So it's not for the faint of heart. It's not easy, so to speak, but I really believe that those who put in that effort, will be winners in the long term, right? You're going to capture that audience, if you take the time to build and influence them, share your company core values and potential business outcomes, and those leads will convert.
Which I think is a nice segue to my twins again, Rupert and Olivia. I think ultimately through through all that hard work, it does drive those outcomes that I think ultimately make a difference to both company performance, marketing teams, team morale, within the marketing function as well as with your agencies. Their sense of achievement and accomplishment of bringing those two worlds together, where by helping really land that sentiment around brand and building that reputation, just seeing that really reaps its rewards with that increased performance with demand gen. This photo is of my twins, but it probably should be of me and my wife, and how when they're getting on and performing effectively actually leads to us as the proverbial customer feeling more fulfilled and happy to stay invested. Thank you for your time, everyone, today. We're now going to wrap up with, from a summary perspective, the 4 areas that Annie spoke to. Just as a recap, show that correlation between awareness and performance of demand. It's a difficult thing to do. It does take time. It definitely takes a lot of relationship building across the different groups. If you do have a split between your marketing and demand function within marketing, you build those relationships, align around the KPIs. I think Annie has had an incredible track record of by investing that time, building those relationships, and ultimately showing that correlation between awareness and demand. It can often actually help spur organizations to start to invest further in their brand building, which, if they may have been more risk averse and focused on short-term demand programs previously. Secondarily, creating that common language to facilitate clear communication. It is very much around creating that context for that conversation of the different KPIs and aligning that to the outcomes that you are collectively going to be delivering as a team. Integrating a media plan and brand demand activities, by aligning those media planning activities and teams, and as Annie quite rightly said, ideally getting it aligned around a centralized media plan and budget, so it can be orchestrated as a single unit. And finally, take that time to invest and socialize your strategy and impact. Consistently focusing on evangelizing the metrics that the stakeholders in the business care about. It's important, even at the brand level, to be talking about it in terms of sales impact and pipeline, as we know that ultimately is what success looks like. Thank you for your time, everyone, today. I'm going to hand it back to Stuart, who is going to kick off Q&A to take any questions that we have for you.
Great. Well, thank you, David, and certainly thank you, Annie. It's great, of course, to hear the agency perspective, but to get that sort of the people who are in the weeds at the brands doing this. Great insights and some really practical information here for our audience. Really interesting stuff. Listen, we're going to move into audience Q&A. I just want to invite everyone, if you do have a question for our speakers, they've been coming in fast and furious. Just simply use that question tool that you see there on the left side of your screen. We're going to get to as many as we can over the next 10, maybe 15 minutes or so. Just with so many coming in, I'm sure we're going to want to go as long as we can. So again, please submit your questions. Let me just also add, if we do not get to your question, and frequently we don't have enough time, I always make sure that all questions get forwarded over to our sponsor. So there's always the opportunity for someone to respond to you offline. Before we get to questions, just two quick reminders. First off, if you want a copy of today's slide deck, you can get it right now in Event Resources. That's the tab up at the top of your screen. So head on in there and download a PDF of today's slides. Also, today's webinar has been recorded and will be available on demand. I'm going to send you a link to that on-demand version later today. So check your email about 3:30 Eastern Time. You'll get that link to the on-demand version. Hey, share it with your colleagues if you think they're going to benefit from this. Right? If you're in the brand side and you want your demand gen colleagues to get some of this, send it over to them. Better yet, have them register. We'll send them that link directly. All right. So again, check out the on-demand one. Let's get to some of these questions, David and Annie, and let's go through these as well as we can. So can we talk a little bit here about budgeting, Annie? And you know, look, we know we've got different silos. We know that they unite, but ultimately everyone's trying to get their right segment here for their marketing budgets. What do you see as sort of understanding where you should be in terms of allocating funds? Is this a matter of, you know, look, the last year was all about agility and pivoting. So do you need to maintain greater agility in that area? What is your general sense of some of that budget requirement?
Yeah, thank you, Stuart. So this is a tough one, you guys. Again, we don't all work at the same company, and we don't all, you know, work in the same industry. So I can only speak from personal experience. Listen, this is you know, art and science working together here. So we're not talking, you know, taking your demand gen budget and suddenly carving out 50% of it to go to brand because, you know, good luck selling that to marketing leadership and sales leadership, right? So in my experience at two different companies, we are talking about 15 to 20% of the overall demand gen budget. So whatever the demand gen budget is, take 15 to 20% of that and devote that to brand. So again, that's me and my experience. It could be very different at your organization, but I hope that provides a little bit of guideline from my experience.
Got it. And David, you know, working on the agency side here, obviously you're seeing people across a wide range of industries. Anything that you want to add there?
No, I think Annie covered that pretty well. I mean, I think the the challenge from a budgeting perspective, very much, I think, often is how can you know, VPs of corporate marketing advocate for what they need to kind of architect things. I think it's also, I think, from an agency perspective on us to help make sure that we're really helping guiding and informing that too. And I think also, you know, having honest conversations with our clients around, you know, what results we can expect depending on where they are in their process. You know, I think it's somewhat irresponsible if we're focusing on demand generation if we know that we've got very poor market awareness. So how can we help also be advocating for what's best for our clients from the agency seat?
So I mean, as you've got to at that point really help them understand where to put their priorities, because you've got to be measuring both of them. Right? You've got to be measuring both sides of that. Right, that brand gen coin, so to speak.
That's right.
Yeah, got it. Annie, look, measurement obviously a key area, and I can't tell you the number of questions that have come in saying, you know, how do I specifically measure brand messaging's impact on my demand gen efforts? You know, and I guess maybe everyone's looking for a magic KPI out of all of this. What is your sense? Look, obviously it's gonna depend on what your goals are for everything. But is there a sense of you know, where you've been, where you are able to sort of have that KPI that helps you make that case, or where you're going, or maybe understanding when you begin to sort of shift your KPIs, depending on funnel or something like that.
Right. So again, really difficult one here, but here's what I think. So you've got your brand campaigns where you're measuring impressions, engagements, brand affinity, share of voice. You've got your demand gen campaigns where you're measuring, marketing qualified leads and whether they convert to sales accepted leads, and eventually whether they contribute to source pipeline, right? There is so when you're looking at your demand gen campaigns pre-brand gen, there's a percentage of demand gen that contributes to source pipeline. So once you've implemented brand gen, you can take a look at that number and to see, since we started running this new strategy of brand gen and we've integrated our, media plan, we've integrated, our flagship campaigns, and we're consistent in presenting a buyer journey approach, hitting our target audience at the right time with the right messaging and helping nurture them through the funnel. Are we seeing an uptake in our demand gen campaigns contributing to source? That would be the measurement that I would look at.
Got it. And so how
pre and post.
Mm-hmm. So Annie, how do you sort of keep using the wrong KPIs along the way? I'll just speak from experience. Frequently when we're doing things and it's very lead gen focused for our clients, it's very much top of funnel. But it can get frustrating when we're being measured on success based on things that would be more mid or lower funnel, right? We're looking at delivering a certain number of leads. We might then, be questioned, why are they not all qualified leads? Or, we only want leads from these very, very specific accounts as those go through. So how do you sort of manage where there may be a disconnect between the different segments?
I think I'm gonna, let me see if I can answer this right. Complicated issue, guys. It's a very complicated issue. So
no, I understand.
Right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I go back to that funnel again, right? That inverted triangle. You've got top of funnel, bottom of funnel, and then it can also be awareness to conversion.
And I'm
right?
going to flash that. I'm going to flash this up on screen.
Oh,
so,
yeah. Let's see if this helps. So if you're saying, if you have a bottom of funnel asset, which is try our product now, and you keep hitting the audience with that message, right? Come to our website, try our product. Come to our website, try our product. Well, what was the journey? You're expecting someone to come to your website, you're an enterprise class software company, and they're going to try your product. What about business outcome? What about case studies? What about thought leadership? Do I trust you? Do I know your brand? Right? So again, brand and demand gen campaigns do have different KPIs by nature. What we're trying to look at is the correlation. If you've warmed up and provided air cover for the target audience, are they then more, once they know your value props, your potential business outcomes you can drive for that company, successful use cases, etc. Once they know what that, are they then more apt to engage with you, right? So then therefore all your demand gen tactics will get clicked on, right? You'll get that PII information because they know you can do something for them. Does that answer the question, Stuart? What do you think?
I think it's about as good as we're going to get in the time that we have. We'll add that for a future webinar, right? I thought that was, Annie, a very good thing, right? Which is just understanding knowing your campaign, understanding what you need to measure for that campaign, and is it the logical outcome that you should expect for that campaign, so that you can move on and not to disconnect, right? Again, if you've got that, if you've just done really well in that Forrester or Gartner report, you're at the whatever quadrant or whatever it is, and you're going to put that out there, is it worth sending it to the person who maybe doesn't even know that they need to make the case for your solution? Maybe that's the wrong thing to be giving them at that point, or maybe that's not what you want to, that's what you want to use for your own outreach, not your third-party outreach. And your third-party outreach, maybe you need something really introducing the case and the pain points and engaging the audience that way at the top of the funnel. And then once that's done, then maybe you should be sending them that Gartner Forrester analyst study along the way and sort of nurturing through, right? Okay.
Exactly.
That's right.
I understand.
And just to add on to that, I think there's also, I think it's easy to to maybe sit through an overview like this and to come away with an outtake of, wow, this is really hard. It's going to be extremely complicated. It could take a lot of time, a lot of resources, and also, how do you kind of go about getting that budget for that top of funnel activities? I think it's worth saying that, I think with a lot of experience that we have with our clients is, even just starting small. I think, to Annie's example there, it's maybe don't start thinking about this for your global demand centers where you're trying to orchestrate it across all your regions and, with thousands of, programmatic touch points that you're trying to keep a track of. Like, start small with just looking at, even just some account-based marketing tactics where pick a couple of, target accounts that you're looking to see if you can kind of move the needle against your broad strokes campaigns. Test and do message testing. See what of your value props for your more top of funnel messaging is making a difference, and getting more direct feedback through your channels and your inside sales teams versus it being a much more broad scale implementation. Where you're tying in a lot of marketing tech to try and track that attribution. Just run tests and, like Annie said, optimize.
Yeah. I think we've got time for another question here, so I'm going to toss this one out. And David, I'm going to start with you, but Annie, I'm sure you're going to have something to say. This is coming from I'm just going to say, people would recognize the brand as a large software company, and they're talking again about sort of just starting now to form a brand team, whereas they've always had a very well-established integrated marketing demand organization. So as they're doing this, and they're looking again to start in a way so that it falls into that integrated way, wondering like what would be sort of like the first steps. They're asking 3 things you would do, but you don't need to give me 3 to sort of get started to make sure that brand team fits smoothly within that more established integrated demand gen organization. So David, you want to just start off on where you see some of that stuff, and then Annie, you can certainly come in.
Yeah, I think I would say a good first step is to look at that. How can you create that alignment in terms of priorities across the teams? I think often brand teams will have a real focus on that reputation building, delivering of the company values, making sure that that there's consistency in look and feel and messaging in market. And I think taking that time to make sure that the brand team is very much involved in conversations around the business priorities for the coming quarters, so they're clear on sales objectives, to start getting them to think about ultimately, when we do think about creating that right creative platform that these kind of integrated brand gen campaigns are kind of hanging off of, that we really have that in mind, so that they are part of really representing that through the funnel, and leveraging their expertise in that domain to help bring together that emotional and rational messaging that is going to both strengthen performance at the top of the funnel, but really start to create that consistent experience further down the funnel.
Mm-hmm. Annie, anything to add on that?
Yeah, I do. There's a couple of important things to have in place. Number one is your buyer journey. So you've got to define your buyer journey from, again, top of funnel to bottom of funnel, or awareness to conversion. And so within that spectrum, you've got to define how you reach the audience at these different points, and then what type of assets are most effective for the target audience at this point. Again, I'll use the same example. If you want someone to try your free product, that's a bottom of funnel offer, not a top of funnel offer. So you put that offer at the bottom of the funnel, and then at the top of the funnel, you offer up, something about that leadership around your industry. You offer up, business outcomes, customer case studies, et cetera. Those are just a few examples. So once you have your buyer, and again, the brand and campaigns team have to come together. Like, we're planning at the same time. It's not, campaigns coming up the buyer journey and brand doing a whole different thing. It's brand and campaigns team together coming up with the buyer journey, agreeing on the same buyer journey, right? Because ultimately, it's one workflow through the entire buyer journey. And then the second thing you have to have in place is your campaign infrastructure, which is defining what is the campaign, what are the programs under the campaign, and then what are the tactics. So that all also maps to the buyer journey, right? Again, if you think about the programs and tactics, you're thinking about tactics top of funnel to bottom of funnel. You're thinking about the type of programs. Is it a giveaway program? Is it a webinar program, right? So everything sort of is based on having that buyer journey in place and having a campaign infrastructure in place to support this, funnel. And then lastly, you're thinking about KPI and measurements, right? You're going to measure brand campaign, the brand portion. You're looking at the people engage and the people click through, and how much traffic do we drive through. And then as you're moving down the funnel in the middle of funnel solution area, you're thinking about, have we offered some premium assets? Have we shared enough about our solutions? Are they coming? Are they coming to gated webinars and free webinars? You've got to do a little bit of a mix in the middle. And then of course, the last piece of it at the bottom of the funnel is where you're really looking hard at those MQLs. So all of those things have to be working together, and it's literally two teams coming together, planning the same campaign for the same target audience, because that's what you're really doing. You're really ultimately trying to drive revenue for your company, but you just have different parts of it, but you're all in the same boat, rowing the same direction, going to the same destination.
Right. Well,
we
are, very well said. And I think that's almost the perfect note to end on here. We are actually approaching the end of our time. So Annie Headley, VP of Corporate Marketing at Nutanix, and David Hayes, VP of Client Growth at our sponsor today, the Marketing Practice. I want to thank you both, both for sharing the insights, building out this presentation, taking some time to answer audience questions. Obviously, we did not have a chance to get to all of the questions that were asked here. So again, I just want to remind people, I will forward it over to our sponsors at the Marketing Practice, and there may be some opportunities for some offline responses. So just some final reminders here to our audience. Again, if you do want those slides, Event Resources tab at the top of the screen. Check your email today, 3:30-ish Eastern time. We're going to send you that link to the on-demand recording. So share that with your colleagues or have them register. We'll send them that link directly. And of course, if the recording is live, once they register, it will just start to play for them once they're there. And lastly, adweek.com/webinars, our webinar calendar. Sign up for an upcoming webinar. Check out our archive of on-demand webinars as well. Again, adweek.com/webinars. So again, let me thank our sponsors, the Marketing Practice, and our speakers today. I want to thank our audience for taking time out of your busy day, and we look forward to seeing everyone at an upcoming Adweek webinar.